Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm super happy to introduce to y'all a game designer and Zenobia Award finalist, Nico Valdez. He is
Mhm.
designer of The Pursuit of Aguinaldo. How are you doing, Nico?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I'm super happy to have you on. So for people who have not been
Mm-mm.
following the Zenobia Award, what is
Mm.
your game about?
Okay, so my game, The Pursuit of Aguinaldo, is about the Philippine American War. So this happened around 1899 to 1902. The general backstory of it is that the Filipinos had just well, there's a lot of interpretations of what exactly happened during that time, but the one that I know is that the Filipinos just won their independence from the Spanish, and with some help from the Americans. But then when the Americans came, there was some. The Americans were not quite sure what to do with the Philippines, and it won out at the end where they wanted to take it as a colony. So there proceeded a war, which was because the Filipino revolutionaries who had just defeated Spain suddenly were under a new colonial power. And so they revolted against the Americans. And then the Americans wanted to control the Philippines. So then that we have the Philippine American War, which happened all over the country, but in different groups. My game focuses primarily on the Luzon area. So the Philippines has three major islands: Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Three major areas. And during the Luzon part of the war, the Americans were trying to capture the leader of the Philippines, which was Emilio Aguinaldo. He was the president of the first Philippine Republic, and the war was, at least from my research, was quite heavily lopsided. The Americans were few, but were better equipped, better trained, and so the casualties were very heavy on the Philippine side, and the Filipinos kept getting pushed back. So what was a war also eventually became sort of a manhunt, where the Americans were going through Luzon and trying to capture Aguinaldo in order to effectively end the war. So that's what the backdrop of my game.
That's awesome. So what made you choose this particular topic? I mean,
Mhm.
when you're looking at history, you got a long range of stuff you could do. So what attracted
Yeah.
you to this?
Oh, so it's also a long story. Back in 2015, okay, so there was a film that was released here in the Philippines. It was very popular. It was called General Luna or General Luna. And Luna, so was one of the generals of the Philippine side, Antonio Luna. And long story short is that although it was never proven, he got into an internal fight with Aguinaldo, and Aguinaldo had him assassinated. That's
Ooh,
the yeah, that's the it was never proven that Aguinaldo had him assassinated, but a lot of the evidence points towards that happening. And so the film was a very interesting film. It centered a lot about nationalism and about how sometimes the Filipinos, their own worst enemy is themselves, wherein they jeopardize they put their their self goals over the goals of the nation. So that movie was a big hit. And at the time, because I run a small game studio here in the Philippines, and what we wanted to do is make board games and card games based on intellectual properties. So we approached the studio and we pitched an idea of could we make a board game based on the film, and it didn't push through. And we just did a bit of research, and that project was shelved. This was in 2015. And when Zenobia Award 2 came out, I thought about it. I just remembered that we had that project, and I took it out of the shelf and I revisited it. Although the game that I have now is really completely different from the original idea that we had. And that's how the game kind of came out.
All right, perfect. I got lots to ask you from this stretch, but I'm very excited to try all these Zenobia finalist
Mhm.
games. But mechanically, what are you doing in the current
Okay.
version of the Pursuit of Aguinaldo? So, like, what are the goals
Okay.
and how are we getting there?
Okay, so the game is a 1v1 asymmetrical game. Okay. You're playing one player is playing as the Americans and one player is playing as the Philippines. The American side is sort of playing it's kind of playing a regular war game. Okay. So they're trying to control land, they're trying to defeat the armies of the Filipinos. But what's different is that the goal of the Americans is to capture Aguinaldo. And Aguinaldo can move in a like Fury of Dracula type way. So it's a war game with a deduction aspect. Okay. And then the Philippine side, on the other hand, is the way I wanted it to play out is sort of they're playing a losing battle because they're outmatched by the firepower of the Americans, but they're just trying to hold off the the invasion long enough for the US public opinion to go against the idea of colonizing the Philippines, because at the time there was a debate. So I also think that the Philippine American War is a very interesting topic, not only for the Philippines but for the Americans, because during that time there was an internal debate on whether the America should be a colonial power, an imperialist power, or should it be different from the European powers that came before it and should stand for liberty and equality and justice for all. And so there was a side that was the anti-imperialists, and there was a side that were the imperialists. So in my game, how I put that there is that there is an anti-imperialist sentiment that is continuously growing in the American side. And um, the Philippine whenever the Americans, whenever they play certain cards, they can commit uh, basically war crimes. They can commit all sorts of atrocities and war crimes, and the Filipino player can report these to the American public in order to gain more sympathy and to push the anti-imperialist agenda. So the goal of the Americans is to capture Aguinaldo, and the goal of the Filipinos is for anti-imperialism to reach 40, and so there's just a tracker. It has to reach that, and whoever gets there first wins the game.
Oh, that sounds really, really fun. So, when
Mhm.
you had ideas for this in 2015, like what did it look like then? And I guess how did it feel
Okay.
to like look at an old project and revise it like this?
Yeah, it was very different because the first idea I had, I it was a social deduction game, because basing it off the film, right? The general idea of the film is: are you going to put your self interests above the nation, about as Filipinos? So the Americans were just an AI, and the Filipinos were playing this sort of semi-cooperative game, wherein if they're able to defeat the Americans, then they all win. But certain Filipino players can betray the rest and side with the Americans in the middle of the game in order to, if they feel like they're losing, or they can switch sides. So basically,
Okay.
it was a very different game. Now it's a 1v1, and it's focused on the Americans trying to capture Aguinaldo, but they also have to uh, protect the to make sure that they're not committing too many atrocities, I guess, if that's the best way to say it, so that the Filipino side can't report too many. And then the Filipino side, on the other hand, is because Aguinaldo, since they kept getting pushed back, he was literally like trekking through the mountains and the forests of the Philippines with a small group of soldiers, and the Americans were constantly on his tail. So I put in a hidden movement part of the game. So there's this map there's a separate map where the Filipino player will be drawing his route with a marker pen, and the American player can try to deduce where he's going and ask and play cards to ask questions where he's going. So yeah, that's how it plays.
That's awesome. So I know very little about politics in the Philippines. So
Mhm.
how is Aguinaldo remembered now? So it sounds like people were very interested in a movie where he assassinated somebody, but also he
Yes,
sounds like kind of a hero in this game where he's running away from the Americans and there's like a fun outlaw aspect to that. So like
he,
what how
he's
is
a
he thought of?
very yeah, he's a very controversial figure. He's a very controversial figure, and the thing is, he has living what do you call this? He has living relatives, and so his living relatives, I think, are constantly trying to defend his legacy. But he has a very controversial legacy because even before Luna, so um, Luna was assassinated, and they were never able to really prove that Aguinaldo was behind it. But another leader, Andres Bonifacio, was assassinated by Aguinaldo, and that one was very clear cut. So people know about that, and yeah, well, not assassinated. He was killed because they had a court and they sentenced him to die and stuff like that. And also, so at the end of the Philippine American War, Aguinaldo was captured, and then he swore allegiance to America. So that's why. And then I think he even swore. No, did he swear allegiance to the Japanese? I'm not sure, but yeah, he's a very controversial character.
So what kinds of choices did you make about representing him in your game and how does this
Mhm.
express like how you feel about him?
So okay, um, so I tried to, because I didn't think it would be fair if I placed like American war atrocities in the game, and I didn't also put like negative stuff about the Philippines. And I mean, not that I wanted to make the game completely negative about both sides, but just trying to make the game as balanced as possible historically. So some of the cards are flavored because Filipino society, a lot of the social issues that, at least according to my research, a lot of the social issues back then are still somewhat prevalent today. Like there's a lot of cronyism, a lot of patronage politics, and stuff like that. So some of the cards are flavored to that way. But also, in my game, um, there are heroes that are part of the game. So Luna is there, Mabini is there. So these are different heroes during the Philippine American War, and each of them has a popularity tracker, which is important for the war effort. And if at any point their popularity goes really low, the Filipino player can choose to assassinate them and or remove them from the game in order to return the popularity of the entire Filipino war effort back up. So like if there's one hero that's pulling the team downwards, you can forcefully remove them from the game in order to bring back the popularity of the entire war effort. So yeah, so Luna so Luna, you can assassinate Luna in the game.
That is wild. That sounds really fun,
Mm.
actually. So, I mean, not nice, but fun.
Mhm,
So,
mhm,
when when you chose this topic, I guess the other thing I wonder about is so when you are in school in the Philippines, is
mhm,
this something that kids are taught about? Like, do you learn about the Philippine American War in school,
mhm.
or
No,
did you have to
no.
seek it out yourself?
I had to seek it out myself. And to be honest, that's why the General Luna film, I think, was a big hit, because it was very eye opening to a lot of Filipinos because we didn't really know about this. And as far as I know, the Philippine American War is also not that well known in America, I think. I don't know. Have you heard a lot? Where is it taught in America and stuff?
Not really. Like, basically, I am aware that we misbehaved,
Mm.
but the details are usually left out in the classroom. So you have to go find
Ye-
it yourself.
yeah, it was a very so yeah, here too. It's not really taught so much. Um, Actually, one of the the things that I want. So one of the reasons why U.S. sentiment turned against the war during the Philippine American War was that the soldiers, the American soldiers, started to write their families about what was happening, and a lot of them were describing the atrocities that were happening and how they were, well, a lot of them were racist, a lot of them were just okay with massacring villages and
Uh,
looting and pillaging and stuff like that, and they were writing it down. Some of them were really troubled, but there were also a lot of them who were happy about it and stuff like that. And the Anti-Imperialist League, one very famous member of the Anti-Imperialist League was Mark Twain. They actually collected all these letters and they published them as pamphlets and distributed them to the American public. And that's how people started to realize that, the America was not necessarily living up to its values in the Philippines. And what I want to do in my game, I haven't done it yet because I've been working more on the mechanical side.
right.
But when you're reporting the atrocities, that's the flavor text. It's like the actual letters that the American soldiers are writing back to their families. I just haven't copy pasted it yet. Right now, just lorem ipsum, but eventually I'm going to fill that up. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so when people play your game, what are you hoping that they learn or like come away with from playing it?
Um, that's a good question. And honestly, I'm not so, because the thing is with games is like you can really treat it as just a game. You can just treat it as a numbers. You can just have fun with it, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people who will just play it and just have like they'll just enjoy it, and not really take into like really think about like the history, the racism, the horrors involved, right? And I think that's fine. For me, it's more of just awareness that this war happened and how important it was to both Philippine and American society.
Nice.
And
And
yeah.
so just a couple of like kind of follow-up questions. So it sounds like you've been designing games for a while. Are you a person who makes historical games typically? You have a game
Uh-huh.
studio. What do y'all typically do?
I do all sorts. So my game design studio is called Balangay Entertainment. Balangay is a old Philippine word for boat, but also means community. Because before the old Filipino communities were organized by boats, so it's synonymous. And we do different kinds of games. One kind is we make games for advocacies for NGOs. So, like using games as an alternative um, information medium instead of just the typical brochures or pamphlets and stuff like that about advocacies, we use games. So that's one. And then we also wanted to make games about Philippine intellectual properties. So that's why we approached the studio to do Henra Luna. We've done a few about Filipino comic books. So like Darna. Darna is a famous superhero. It's the most famous superhero in Philippine comics. And I was working on a game on Trece. I don't know if you've heard of that. There was a Netflix anime. It's about Philippine. It's about a Philippine paranormal detective set in modern times. So imagine like Constantine, but instead of fighting Western monsters, they're fighting monsters from Philippine folklore. So those are some games that I've done. Yeah, I think uh, I'm more as a designer. I'm more used to designing within a scope, within a restriction. So, for example, if there's an advocacy, then this is the learning objective. Then that's the scope that I have to make a game about, or an intellectual property like this comic book character or this show. So doing historical gaming was a very similar experience because I just had to focus on the history, a specific history. I'm not that type of design. I rarely design where like just a blank sheet and like you can do whatever you like. I kind of like restrictions.
Awesome. And then so we're gonna talk some more about this after I cut the show, but just the softy questions at the end. What games have you been playing recently that you've enjoyed?
Yeah, actually lately I've been so preoccupied with the contest that I haven't been able to really play recently. Um, but the last times I was thinking, well, one of the big inspirations for Pursuit of Aguinaldo is actually Arc Nova. The Filipino side has that mechanic wherein you play there's like five actions, and as you play them, it resets back to the start of the queue. So I lifted that mechanic straight from Arc Nova. I like the games of Shem Phillips, of Garfield Games. I was playing a lot of Paladins of the West Kingdom, but I'm not very good at it. So, but I enjoy it. And then, yeah, Raiders of the North Sea. I generally like to play um, Euro games, like the medium complexity Euro type games.
Nice. And then, do you have an online presence, social media, website? And if so, where can people find
Mhm.
you?
Oh, so I'm most active on Facebook. Yeah, because in the Philippines we still use a lot of Facebook. I know outside it's not that used anymore. So it's just my name, Nicanor Marco P. Valdez. But so my advocacy work is under Balangay Entertainment. So that's Balangay.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that goes into the show notes. Nico, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. This was great, and I'm really, really excited about your game.
Yeah,
Congratulations
thanks.
on being a finalist. This is awesome.
Yeah, if you want to try it, actually, I have a tabletop simulator mod. So
Beautiful.
yeah, and I think because I just skimmed through this podcast the other day, and I think I have to watch a lot of episodes because the mentors in Zenobia, one of their big, at least in our pod, one of their big advices for me is that my game needs or typically would have a solo mode, and I'm not much of a solo gamer. And so I think I need to brush up. So I just going through your podcast is like how to design solo modes, how to okay, this is exactly what I need to watch.
All right, we can talk about that after the cut. All right, everybody out there,
Mhm,
I'm everywhere's beyond solitaire. Please like, subscribe, comment, ask
mhm.
questions, and most of all, happy gaming.